goes like abyss, my mind takes flight.
My neighbor pulled out my 6-year-old out of the pool while I was inside answering a phone call I thought was urgent. It wasn't urgent. My son was face down in 3 feet of water for what the doctor said was probably 90 seconds. Long enough to matter, not long enough to cause damage. A miracle, they called it. The neighbor, they called him. The whole street showed up at his door with casseroles and cards. I cried in his driveway. I held his hand. I told him he was the reason my child was still breathing. And I meant every word. What I didn't say, what I have never said a single living soul to, is that 3 weeks before that, I had reported him to Child Protective Services anonymously for something I thought I saw through his kitchen window. Something I was wrong about. I know I was wrong now. The case was closed in 48 hours. No findings, no evidence, because there was nothing to find. But he never knew it was me. And then he saved my son. And now he waves at me every morning from his driveway like I'm the best neighbor he ever had. I need you to understand something before I tell you this. I'm not a noisy person. I don't stand at windows watching people. I don't involve myself in other people's businesses. I raise 2 kids. I work full time. I mind my life. But that night, it was late, maybe 11. I was in my kitchen getting water. No lights on, just me and the dark and the quiet. And his kitchen light was on. The houses on our street sit close. Older neighborhood, built in the 60s when people weren't precious about privacy. His kitchen window faces my kitchen window directly, maybe 40 feet between us. I wasn't watching him, I just saw a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, standing on his counter, crying. Not the kind of crying kids do when they want something, the other kind, the silent kind, shoulders shaking, head down, and him standing behind her. His hand on her shoulder. That's it. That's all I saw. But the way she was standing, so small, so still, and the way he was leaning over her, something in my stomach turned to ice. I told myself I was overreacting. I went to bed. I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m. By morning, I had already filed the report. Her name was Lily. She was his niece, his sister's daughter, 8 years old, staying with him for 2 weeks while her mother, his sister, was in the hospital having surgery for a tumor they found in her spine. Benign, thank God, but terrifying, and the surgery was long, and the recovery was longer, and someone needed to take Lily. So he did. He took 2 weeks off work, set up the guest room with fairy lights because Lily was afraid of the dark, learned how to braid hair because Lily wouldn't go to school without her hair braided, made her the same breakfast every morning, scrambled eggs, no pepper, toast with crust off, because routine was the only thing keeping her calm while her mother was in the hospital 200 miles away. That night, I saw her crying at the counter. She had just gotten off the phone with her mom, and her mom sounded weak, tired, different. And Lily, 8 years old, had decided in a way that children sometimes decide things with absolute certainty that her mother was dying. He had his hand on her shoulders because he was trying to figure out how to tell an 8-year-old that love sometimes sounds exhausted without being gone. I know all of this because his sister told me herself at a block party 2 years later while I was handing her a cup of lemonade and smiling like a neighbor. She said, "He's the best man I know. He saved that little girl's summer. And he saved your son. That's just who he is." I excused myself and went inside and sat on my bathroom floor for 20 minutes. I want to tell you what an anonymous report actually does, because I didn't know. Not really. I think most people think that it's a system with filters, that someone reviews it carefully, that is handled with precision and discretion, and if there is nothing there, nothing happens. Here's what happened in this case. 2 caseworkers came to his door on a Wednesday morning. He was getting ready for work. He answered the door in his work clothes, and they told him why they were there, and he, according to what I later pieced together, went completely white. They interviewed him for 40 minutes on his own front porch. His neighbor across the street watched the whole thing from her car before pulling out of her driveway. By noon, there were 3 people on our street knew that someone had called CFS or CPS on the man at number 14. They interviewed Lily at school without telling him first. That's protocol apparently. Lily, 8 years old, was pulled out of her third grade class and sat in a room with a stranger who asked her questions she didn't understand and came home that afternoon asking him if he was in trouble and if she was the reason and if her mother was going to be angry. He spent that night reassuring a traumatized child that everything was fine. The case was closed 48 hours later, unfounded, no evidence, exactly as it should have been. He never found out who reported him. He told someone once, I heard it secondhand, at the same block party, that he understood, that he knew people were trying to protect kids, that he didn't hold it against whoever it was, that he hoped they made the right call with the information they had. I have replayed that sentence 10,000 times. There is a specific kind of shame that doesn't burn, it sits. It just sits in the center of your chest like a stone that's been there so long, your body has started to build around it. You wake up and it's there. You make coffee and it's there. You watch your son eat breakfast, your son who's alive and eating cereal and arguing about screen time, and it's there. The morning after my son's accident, I stood on my front window and watched him back his car out of the driveway. He saw me. He rolled down his window. He said, and I remember every word, he's a tough kid. They always are. The ones who scare you like that. He's going to be fine. And then he waved. Not a big wave, just a small one. The kind that you give a neighbor. Easy, unbothered, no debt implied, no transaction, no look that said you owe me your life now. Just a wave. And I stood there with my hand on my glass door and I thought, this man has no idea that I tried to destroy his life. And he just saved my son. And here's waving at me like we're just 2 people who live next to each other, which is all we are to him, which is not what he is to me. I've spent 3 years deciding whether to tell him. Here is what has stopped me every single time. My therapist, I started seeing one about a year after the accident, asked me something that I haven't been able to shake. She said, who would the confession be for? I told her it would be for him, so he'd have the truth, so he'd know. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, would it give him anything he doesn't already have? Or would it take something away from him that he has chosen to carry peacefully? I didn't have an answer. She kept going, gently, the way she does. She said that sometimes confession is an act of love and accountability, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it's a way of transferring weight, of taking the stone out of your own chest and placing it in someone else's hand. She asked me what he would do with the information. I thought about it, honestly. He would probably forgive me because that is what the kind of man he is. He would probably say something measured and kind, and it would make everything worse. He might think about Lily. He might lie awake once or twice. He might now look at me differently, not with hate, but with something more complicated that I'd have to see every morning when he backed out of his driveway. Or, and this is the part that really keeps me up, he might not forgive me. And when I have to live next door to that, and suddenly, I don't know, without question, that the confession was always about my comfort, not his. But here's the other side, the one I can't dismiss. He deserves the truth. doesn't he? I told my husband 14 months after the accident. Not because I planned to, because I couldn't sleep and he asked me what was wrong for the fourth night in a row and something just opened. I told him everything: the window, the report, the 48 hours, the block party, the wave, the therapist, all of it at 2 a.m. in our dark bedroom in a voice I barely recognized as mine. He was quiet for a long time, not the angry kind of quiet, the processing kind. Then he said, "You reported him based on what you saw." I said, "Yes." He said, "And you were trying to protect the child?" I said, "Yes." He said, "And you were wrong?" I said, "Yes." And then he asked something I didn't expect. He said, "I think you have been pushing yourself for making a human mistake in a way that was actually responsible. The system worked the way it was supposed to. He was cleared. Lily was fine. You didn't ruin his life." I said, "But I could have." And he didn't have an answer for that, because that's the part that lives in the gap between intention and consequence, between what I meant to do and what could have happened. I meant to protect the child. I could have destroyed an innocent man. Both of those things are permanently equally true. And my husband, God, I love him for this, reached over in the dark and just held my hand. He didn't fix it. He didn't tell me what to do. He just held my hand. We haven't talked about it since, but sometimes I catch him looking at our neighbor house with an expression I can't quite read, and I wonder what it costs him to wave back. Lily came back this past summer. She was 12 now, tall, serious looking in a way some girls get at that age, like they've started to understand the world requires something from them and they're quietly deciding how much to give. She was sitting on his front porch when I pulled into my driveway, reading a book, legs dangling off the side. I waved, she waved back, and then she said, unprompted, the way kids sometimes speak directly into the universe without caring who hears, she said, "This is my favorite place. I've been coming here since I was little." I said, "I know. Your uncle talks about you a lot." She smiled, looked back at her book. And I stood there in my driveway with my keys in my hand and my heart in my throat thinking about the night 4 years ago. Her at the counter, shoulders shaking, him behind her trying to find the right words. The image I have built a story around, the story I had turned into a report, the report that brought two caseworkers to his door and pulled her out of the classroom and made an 8-year-old ask if she was the reason he was in trouble. She doesn't know any of that. She just knows that this is her favorite place. I went inside and made dinner and called my son in from the backyard, poured the water and sat down across from my husband and thought, this is what the ripple of a single moment looks like 4 years out. She's fine. He's fine. My son is fine. And I'm the only one still drowning. I made a decision last night. I'm not going to tell him. I know how that sounds. I know some of you are frustrated by that. I've read the comments in my head 1,000 times. He deserves to know. You're protecting yourself. The truth matters. You're not wrong. But here's what I've landed on after 4 years of carrying this. I've reported him because I believed in it. At that moment, that child was in danger. I was wrong about what I saw, but I was not wrong about it to take it seriously. The system, flawed and imperfect and terrifying as it is, worked the way it was supposed to. He was cleared. Lily was protected from the worst of it: his life, his job, his relationships, all intact. Telling him now would not give him anything back. It would only give me something, and I've decided that's not a fair trade. What I'm going to do instead, what I've been quietly doing for 3 years now, is show up. When his car broke down last winter, drove him to work for 2 weeks. When he got sick in the fall and I saw his lights were off for 3 days, I left a soup on his door. When Lily visited and mentioned she was struggling in math, I tutored her twice a week for a month. I'm not paying a debt. You can't pay a debt like this. I'm just trying to be someone worthy of grace he gave me without knowing he was given it. Trying to become slowly, the neighbor he already thinks I am. 2 weeks ago, I was in my garden. He came out to check his mail, and we ended up talking over the fence the way neighbors do. Nothing important. Weather, the new family moving in at the end of the street, whether the old oak on the corner was going to come down before it fell someone's car. And then, out of nowhere, he said, "You know, when I first moved here, I was pretty closed off, kept to myself, didn't really trust people easily." I asked him why. He said, "Something happened years ago, something misunderstood, something they saw, and it caused a lot of problems for me. Nothing permanent, but it shook me, made me think people were always going to look for the worst." I kept my face still. I said, "What changed?" He leaned on the fence post and looked down the street for a moment. He said, "This street, honestly, you guys, the way people actually show up here, my sister always says real character is when people do when there's nothing in it for them. And I've seen it here. I've felt it." He looked at me and smiled. "You're good people," he said. "All of you." And then he went inside, and I stood in my garden with the dirt on my hand and tears I did not let fall, and I thought about the woman I was 4 years ago, and the woman I've been trying to become every day since. And I thought, maybe that's all any of us can do. See something, get it wrong, break something we can't fully repair, and then spend the rest of our lives trying to deserve the version of us that someone else already believes in it. I don't know if I made the right choice. I don't know if I ever will. But now I know I'm going to keep showing up. And maybe that has to be enough.